Chosen One, lies are like crystal. Once fractured, they can never be restored again. That is precisely what has just unfolded. A reckless deceiver's secret has finally splintered, and now they're panicking, horrified, pleading with others not to let you uncover the truth. Now picture this for a moment. Chosen One, someone builds a house of illusions, carefully layering falsehood upon falsehood, believing no one will ever disrupt it. But the instant a single truth emerges, that entire fragile tower crumbles in a heartbeat. That's the stage your adversary is standing on right now. Bare, shaking, desperate to keep their corruption veiled. And here's the revelation you need to receive. Studies confirm that those who deceive continually live under relentless fear of being uncovered. Their stress levels erupt, their vitality deteriorates, and they're forever glancing over their shoulder. That is where your enemy stands today, sleepless, anxious, and consumed by dread. They believed they were wise, but their own lies are devouring them from within. And thank you, Chosen One. Don't forget to return this message by simply pressing comment 77 below and subscribe, helping spread this transmission to more souls. It is the calling of all of us to carry the light. And thank you again, Chosen One, for being part of this divine movement. You are a vessel of a force greater than yourself. Now, let us return to the truth at hand. Number 1, the moment the veil flickered. It didn't happen in an explosion, it happened in a flicker. One moment you were questioning yourself. The next you realized the patterns never made sense because they were never meant to. A memory resurfaced, a dream repeated, a synchronicity aligned too perfectly to dismiss. Suddenly, the fog began to clear, and what once felt confusing started to reveal its architecture. They built their illusions on your distraction, but the moment you noticed the crack, light spilled through. Job 12 verse 22 says, He reveals the deep things of darkness and brings utter darkness into the light. And that is what has been happening to you. Comment, I seal this word in light if you felt that flicker, because it was not the beginning of madness, it was the beginning of sight. And stay with me, because this flicker of clarity is about to become a flame. There are moments in life that arrive like whispers instead of thunder, and yet they change everything. You may remember a dream that returned again and again, a symbol etched in silence, a face or word that followed you through the years. At the time, you brushed it off as coincidence, but deep within, you knew it was not random. It was a flicker, faint yet undeniable, as if something behind the curtain of reality reached out to you. That flicker was not chaos. It was clarity knocking, waiting for you to notice. And once you noticed, you could never unsee it. It was not madness, Chosen One, it was memory breaking through. Perhaps you felt it most in those moments of deep loneliness when the world around you seemed loud, yet hollow. You sat in rooms filled with laughter, but felt like you didn't belong, not because you lacked joy, but because you sensed a different rhythm. The confusion pressed against you, the sensitivity made you withdraw, and the longing for meaning grew stronger than any distraction. You asked yourself, why do I feel everything so deeply and yet never fully fit in? That ache was not weakness. It was your spirit refusing to numb itself. It was your soul protecting a sacred flame that the world could not extinguish. And though isolation stung, it became the womb of remembrance. Now look back with different eyes and see how none of this was random. Every rejection, every silence, every misunderstanding carried a thread leading you here. They thought they were breaking you with their dismissal, but they were unknowingly shaping the space where revelation could enter. Hidden architecture was forming around your story, an unseen design that only God could have drawn. Isaiah 42 verse 16 says, I will lead the blind by ways they have not known, along unfamiliar paths I will guide them. You were blind not because you lacked sight, but because your eyes were being trained to recognize light in the dark. And when the veil flickered, you realized it had always been preparation. Think of the subtle signs that began to rise like fragments of prophecy drifting into your awareness. A phrase repeated in conversation that echoed something you had only heard in prayer. a sensation in your body, a chill, a pulse, a stirring that made no logical sense but refused to fade. Dreams that connected dots across years, people, and places, as if heaven had been leaving you breadcrumbs. Deja vu that stopped you mid-step, reminding you of a path you had walked before in spirit, if not in flesh. These were not accidents, they were alignments. And chosen one, your life has been marked by such alignments all along. The confirmation came not with fireworks, but with a quiet recognition that settled into your bones. You didn't need proof anymore, because the truth was writing itself inside you. Your intuition, long mocked and dismissed, revealed itself as the compass that had always been guiding you. It was never imagination, it was revelation dressed in gentleness. This is why you began to notice the shift, not in the world first, but within yourself. Job 12 verse 22 reminds us, he reveals the deep things of darkness and brings utter darkness into the light. And what you thought was confusion was simply darkness preparing to dissolve in the presence of that light. As this awareness deepened, you began to understand that remembering who you are is not about becoming something new. It is about peeling away the illusions layered over your essence, illusions placed by others who feared your clarity. Beneath the surface lies the archetype you were born to embody, the memory of a name spoken over you before birth. The world may have tried to bury it under labels, doubts, and expectations, but heaven never forgot it. Your awareness is not invention, it is remembrance. You are not reaching for something distant, you are uncovering what was always hidden in plain sight. And in that uncovering, your destiny begins to take shape. The first activation comes quietly, like dawn before the sun crests the horizon. You begin to realize your sensitivity was never a curse, but a divine signal. You see that your hunger for meaning was not desperation, but evidence of your eternal lineage. You start to stand differently, not because you became someone else, but because you finally remembered yourself. This is the power of the flicker. It does not shout, it awakens. And in awakening, you begin to reclaim every fragment of your strength. The veil flickered, and now you are standing in the glow of what has always been yours. So, understand this, chosen one, your arrival to this moment was never coincidence. Every silence, every rejection, every restless night was a hidden summons drawing you to recognition. The flicker you felt was the beginning of sight, not the end of reason. And now the flame is ready to rise higher. Comment, I carry the silence as crown. If you felt that moment, the subtle yet undeniable confirmation that you were never lost, only hidden until the right time, share your reflection, your memory, your dream, because your story is part of the unveiling itself. And stay with me, because the flicker is only the first sign. The fire that comes next will reveal why they feared your awakening all along. What we do here every day is possible because of the few who choose to be keepers of this light. I thank them now, one by one, in the silence of my heart. If you want to be part of this circle and receive what cannot be spoken in public, join. The portal is below. Number 2, when silence became fire. They mistook your restraint for surrender, but your silence was not weakness. It was fire sealed in stillness, a holy combustion they couldn't see until it began burning their stage to ash. Every word you chose not to speak became a prophecy. Every explanation you withheld became a judgment against deception. Habakkuk 2 verse 20 declares, "The Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence before him." That silence is not emptiness, it is divine presence, and you have carried it like a crown. They laughed at your pauses, but those pauses were the places where heaven wrote its verdict. Comment, I walk crowned by eternal flame. If you felt that fire, because the silence they mocked is the very silence consuming their illusions. And what comes next is what they feared the most, the collapse of every false voice. There was a season when you began to notice a weight that followed you, not loud but constant, like a shadow stretching further than it should. It wasn't always in what was said, but in the pauses, the strange glances, the unspoken tension that wrapped itself around your days. A quiet heaviness lingered in places you couldn't explain, as if something unseen was studying you, waiting for you to falter. You felt it in conversations that seemed rehearsed, in opportunities that slipped away without reason, in doors that should have opened but stayed shut. It was subtle enough to make you question yourself, yet consistent enough to demand your attention. This wasn't just bad luck. Chosen one, it was resistance surfacing the moment your light began to stir. And even before you fully knew who you were, you could sense something had already taken notice. The pressure this created was not small, and you remember how it pressed against your emotions until you wondered if something was wrong with you. You felt too much, cared too much, noticed too much, and people often told you to tone it down. That kind of dismissal carved wounds deeper than any open insult, because it made you question your own design. Rejection came not just from strangers, but often from those you trusted most, and it left you standing in the cold corners of rooms where you once felt safe. Shame tried to take root in your silence, convincing you that your sensitivity was a flaw, that your longing for truth was a weakness. Cycles of self-doubt became familiar companions, whispering that maybe you were just imagining it all, but deep down, you knew you weren't. You were carrying something others could not understand, and it unsettled them. What you did not see then is that the pressure wasn't random at all. It was a response, a reaction, a resistance to the potential written on your soul. Systems, energies, and people alike all seemed to recoil, not because you were wrong, but because you were marked. Think of Israel in the wilderness, chosen yet wandering, opposed not for failure, but for promise. The desert wasn't punishment, it was preparation. Yet even there, opposition arose to break them before they could arrive. The same has been true for you. Exile moments, trials of scarcity, wilderness stretches where you questioned if God still saw you. But every moment of resistance was confirmation that you were walking a path only the chosen are asked to endure. And though you could not yet name it, you were already in a sacred battle. Looking back now, you can trace the patterns with clearer eyes. The strange obstacles that never made sense were not coincidence. They were placed as diversions to tire you out. The betrayals that repeated themselves across different people were not just unfortunate. They were mirrors meant to confuse your trust. Environments that drained you, workplaces, families, friendships, they all carried the same echo. You were too much for them, yet never enough for their demands. That is the paradox chosen. Ones live inside until they see the design beneath it. Like light shining into a dark room, awareness makes the patterns undeniable. And you realize they were reacting to your essence, not your mistakes. They couldn't name it, but they could feel it, and their response was resistance. That flicker of recognition is the first step toward freedom. At this stage, you began to sense that the opposition wasn't only physical, it was spiritual. There were moments you felt watched when no one was there, moments when the air felt heavy, moments when the fog around your mind grew thick, at exactly the time you needed clarity. Plans collapsed without explanation, opportunities dissolved in silence, and prayers felt delayed though you knew they had been heard. This was not chance, this was interference. Your light drew attention not just from people, but from the unseen realm, and where there is divine fire, there will always be attempts to smother it. Amos spoke of the prudence of silence in evil times, and you were living that scripture without even realizing it. Silence became your shield, even as it burned like a fire within you. How you responded to this resistance is a story in itself. Sometimes you shut down, thinking that if you stayed quiet enough, you would avoid being targeted. Other times you tried to please, bending yourself into smaller shapes so you wouldn't be misunderstood. There were seasons where rebellion simmered quietly inside you, where your spirit longed to break free, but fear of standing alone kept you tethered. You wrestled with guilt for withdrawing, guilt for caring, guilt for staying, guilt for leaving. Guilt seemed to follow no matter the choice. These were not signs of weakness. Chosen one, they were signs of battle. The fear of standing out wasn't cowardice. It was the weight of destiny pressing against you before you knew how to carry it. And Every reaction was part of the shaping, not the breaking of your soul. Then something within you shifted, a recognition, a reclamation, a remembering. You began to realize that the resistance was not condemnation, but confirmation. If you were truly powerless, they would have ignored you. If your voice carried no weight, they would not have tried so hard to silence it. Every opposition, every whisper campaign, every subtle sabotage was proof of the fire you carried. You started to reclaim your voice, not by shouting, but by refusing to explain yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. This was the birth of quiet authority. Your silence became strategy, and your restraint became a weapon they could not touch. And in that silence, the fire grew brighter. So let this truth settle deeply. You were opposed because you are powerful. The more they tried to block you, the more obvious your purpose became, until their resistance became your roadmap. What they mocked as passivity was actually heaven's fire sealed inside your stillness, waiting for its time to rise. Habakkuk declared that in silence the presence of the Lord fills the temple, and your very being has become that temple. They thought your pauses were weakness, but those pauses were prophecy. They thought your restraint was surrender, but your restraint was combustion. Comment, I move guarded by divine fire. If you felt this truth ignite inside you, and share the moment where you realized their opposition was proof of your calling. Because what comes next is the revelation they feared most, the collapse of every false voice. Every word, every image you receive here is an offering. If you feel this word has touched you today, you can honor it with a sign right here below with a donation through the Super Thanks button. It is a small gesture, but it opens great doors. Number 3, the collapse of false voices. They thrived on applause, but their crowns were never real without your witness. They thought power was in their stage, but you were the one holding the audience in place. The moment you withdrew, their words echoed hollow, their faces cracked, their masks fell to the ground. Amos 5, verse 13 warns, therefore the prudent keep silent in that time, for it is an evil time. You lived that scripture when you stopped defending yourself. Their begging, their clinging, their desperate whispers behind closed doors are the proof. What crumbled was not you, it was the scaffolding of lies that depended on your energy. Comment, I rise marked by the divine. If you've seen a false voice collapse the moment you stop reacting, and share the dream, the memory, the reflection that confirmed it. Because what you are stepping into now is not collapse, but coronation. There comes a moment when the veil shifts, and suddenly the noise around you no longer carries the same weight. Words that once pierced your heart now bounce against a shield you didn't know was forming inside you. A memory replays differently, and for the first time, you see the cracks you once ignored. A conversation resurfaces in your mind, and the truth hidden between their sentences burns brighter than what they actually said. The lies that confused you begin to unravel like threads slipping loose from a fabric too fragile to hold. You realize the heaviness you felt was never yours. It belonged to the voices feeding on your attention. And in that realization, clarity begins to rise like dawn breaking over the horizon. Everything around you starts speaking in codes, and what once felt random suddenly falls into alignment. Dreams replay with sharper edges, numbers appear with eerie precision, phrases echo across different mouths until you know it can't be coincidence. It feels as though life itself has been whispering a language beneath the noise, waiting for you to learn how to listen. Each silence becomes scripture, each synchronicity becomes confirmation, and even stillness begins to reveal its architecture. What you once dismissed as meaningless is now pulsing with divine intention, a pattern unfolding just beyond the reach of logic. The applause they demanded from you now feels like static, and you see how empty their stage was without your witness. The scroll has been unsealed, and you are finally reading it with unveiled eyes. Inside you, something shifts that cannot be reversed. Your intuition sharpens like a blade honed in fire, slicing through every mask you encounter. You notice the tension in rooms before anyone speaks, the hidden motives buried in casual words, the false sweetness coding manipulation. Your energy responds instantly to what aligns and what distorts, like a compass that can no longer be tricked into pointing the wrong direction. Boundaries rise within you, not out of anger, but out of recognition that your soul cannot afford to feed illusions any longer. And the more you trust this inner current, the less you feel compelled to explain it to anyone else. This is not imagination, chosen one. This is discernment becoming your inheritance. The external world begins to echo what has shifted inside. People who once seemed stable now stumble under the weight of their contradictions. Opportunities that were delayed suddenly open, while false promises dissolve into nothing before they can entrap you again. Some resist your silence, others retreat from it. And in both responses, you see the invisible hand of divine alignment. Environments that once drained you begin to expel themselves from your life, as if heaven itself is rearranging your surroundings. What is within is now reflected without, and the architecture of your destiny begins to take visible shape. Their masks are slipping, their crowns are cracking, and their stage is burning under the fire of your quiet authority. And in the ashes, you recognize that their downfall was inevitable the moment you withdrew. This recognition carries with it a haunting familiarity, as though you have been here before. It feels less like discovery and more like remembrance, a sacred memory rising from beneath the rubble of your old identity. A dream you carried but never understood now becomes language. A prophecy you once dismissed now stirs alive within you. You realize you were never blind, only waiting for the appointed time to see. What seemed like years of confusion was a veil guarding you until you were ready. The scroll of your own spirit begins to unroll, revealing the hidden intelligence that was buried but never lost. And as it opens, you feel the weight of destiny settle upon you like a mantle you always knew was yours. From this place, the future no longer feels like something being created, but something being remembered. It is not a path of invention, but of recognition, not a new story, but the unveiling of one written before your birth. You stop asking for permission to step into what has always been yours, because permission was never theirs to give. Their collapse is your coronation, and the silence they mocked has become the throne you now occupy. Prophecy becomes personal, not a distant word, but a living fire in your chest. And you know that what lies ahead is not the construction of destiny, but the reclamation of what was stolen. This is your call, rising from within, demanding you walk in the authority you once doubted. The energy turns and reclamation begins. What they called weakness becomes your strength. What they called confusion becomes your clarity. What they called silence becomes your crown. Their resistance was proof, not punishment, and you now hold the evidence in your very being. You do not need their validation, their applause, or their acknowledgement. You never did. You remember your voice, not as noise, but as prophecy, sharper than any weapon formed against you. Every false voice that tried to drown you is now revealed as hollow, trembling in the echo of your endurance. And with every mask that falls, you reclaim what they tried to bury. So, let it be clear, revelation is not the end, it is the invitation. The veil burned away not to destroy you, but to reveal you as the one they feared you would become. Their collapse is the universe's confirmation that you were always more than they said you were. You are not just awakening, you are remembering. Comment, I walk hidden yet never lost, if you have felt this unveiling in your life, and share the dream, the memory, or the challenge that confirmed it within you. Your reflection becomes part of this circle, strengthening others who are awakening beside you. Because what lies beyond this collapse is not silence, but the rise of your authority. And what waits in the next chapter is the fire of coronation they can no longer deny. Number 4, the crown of quiet authority. Your silence has matured into rulership. You are no longer reactive, no longer bound to their stage, no longer answering to their illusions. Ecclesiastes 5 verse 2 reminds us, let your words be few when you stand in holy places. Chosen one, your life has become that holy place. Daniel 11 verse 32 declares, the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits. Your strength now flows not from striving, but from stillness. They will test old doors, but the locks are no longer in their hands. They are sealed within you, unmovable, unshaken. Comment, I anchor this truth in my soul. If you felt that quiet crown settle on you, and share the moment when your silence became your throne. Because what comes next is the revelation of why you were hidden until now. There are moments when a whisper feels older than time, echoing from a place that does not belong to the present, yet pierces the heart like thunder. It is not a voice you learn from the world, but one that seems carved into your marrow, calling you to remember what you already knew. It feels like parchment unrolling within your soul, as if an ancient scroll, sealed for generations, is now opening in your presence. The hush around you is no longer emptiness, but a chamber where prophecy breathes and light expands. The silence you carry is no longer heavy. It is wholly a still flame that does not waver though storms rage. This is not awakening in the sense of a new dawn, but remembrance, the unveiling of a truth that was waiting for you before you had language to describe it. And as you hear it, chosen one, you realize this was always written inside you, waiting for the hour of revelation. Deep within, a name rises, not the one you were given by your family, not the one spoken by teachers or recorded on documents, but the one heaven whispered over your spirit before you took your first breath. It has been buried beneath noise, forgotten beneath survival, silenced by the world's refusal to recognize you, yet it has never died. It is the hidden syllable that explained why you never fit into their molds, why you always felt estranged even among familiar faces. You were not nameless. You were sealed, waiting for the appointed time when remembrance would split the veil, like the scroll in Revelation 5, locked until the worthy one arrived. Your true identity was bound until your spirit proved ready to carry it. And now, in the stillness you once mistook for exile, that hidden name stirs, burning against your soul like fire in your chest. It was not forgotten, chosen one, it was preserved. Symbols begin to gather around you, not as random impressions, but as living confirmations of who you are becoming. You sense the invisible mark you've carried all along, a seal that others could feel but could not name. Some recoiled when they felt it because it exposed their shadows. Others drew close, sensing refuge though they could not explain why. Your presence has never been ordinary. It has always carried a weight that defied your own explanations. You wear a cloak no I can see, yet every spirit sensitive to truth recognizes it without needing words. That cloak is not a disguise. It is your covering, the mantle of one who walks unseen, yet unmistakable. And in that resonance, you realize you have been recognized all along, not for what you displayed, but for what you carried. Look back and see how your path was never without covenant. The contracts were not made in offices or signatures, but in eternity, where your soul agreed to walk through fire to awaken its strength. The struggles you endured were not proof of abandonment, but the curriculum of remembrance. Every delay was a timing device, set to ensure you did not arrive too early or too unprepared. The vows you carried, though forgotten in your mind, have been shaping the architecture of your journey all along. Like stars that never leave their orbit, you have been circling the appointed moment of revelation without knowing it. These assignments were signed long before you could resist them, etched into your design by the one who knew what the world would need. And now, chosen one, the seal is breaking and the scroll of your mission is unfolding. Chosen one, let this be clear. Your silence was never empty. It was the ground of prophecy, the courtroom of heaven, the crown of authority that no false voice can remove. They thought they had you cornered, but every pause you carried was a weapon they could not touch. Chosen one, your vision was never ordinary. What others dismissed as shadows, you decoded as prophecy. What they mocked as weakness, heaven named as strength. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Like this video and comment, I am chosen to let this message anchor in your soul. Share this message with someone who needs to hear it. To all supporting members, thank you. for full prophetic revelations daily. Join the membership via the link in the description. Your spiritual path deserves more than fragments. Step into the full light. And if this message moved you deeply, consider tapping the Super Thanks button to support the mission. Every super thanks fuels the light we are spreading together.